culture and mythology, the origins of music are closely tied with gods and their interactions with mortals. Music was considered a gift from the gods and represented harmony and order in the universe, and inspired and connected a lot of mortals to heaven. Most famously, the seven muses, from which the word music actually came from, and various gods such as Apollo and Athena contributed to the development of music according to Greek culture. The piece we just played is called a Gigian Sea. Describes a notable dispute between the Greek mythology and the duels between the god Apollo and the satyr Marsyas on the flute.
So this all actually started with the goddess Athena, who you may know as the goddess of war. Of wisdom. But besides her prowess as a war strategist, she also greatly contributed to the musical culture in Greece through an instrument that she invented, which is the double flute, sometimes also known as the double oboe or the double syrinx. And it eventually evolved into the flute that we now know and play today. So you can see a picture of it up here. And when she first invented it, she very excitedly presented it at the gods' banquet table to the other gods and goddesses. However, she didn't expect that she was actually laughed at by the other gods and goddesses, especially Hera and Aphrodite, who told her that she looked really, really funny with her face turning blue and her cheeks puffed out as she blew air into the flute in order to play it. And so she was so embarrassed, she ran to the forest to practice. And it was there where she saw her reflection in the stream, and she became so embarrassed that she actually cursed the flute and threw it away when she noticed that her fellow gods and goddesses were right.
So that leads us into our second part of the story, Apollo's Lyre. The story starts with Hermes. There are a lot of parents here today, and I'm sure you guys have children which are here today. But can you imagine having a child, and seconds after the child is born, they run away on an adventurous quest to steal their half-brother's cow? This is exactly what happened in the story of Apollo's Lyre. The myth begins with Hermes, who is the god of trade, thieves, and travel, and known for his trickery and cleverness. Literally seconds after his birth, he set out on an adventurous quest and came across a herd of sacred cattle that belonged to his half-brother Apollo. Hermes stole the cattle and used his trickery to hide his theft from Apollo. However, as Hermes was walking back home, he found a tortoise, and he hauled this tortoise's shell and lined cow intestines along the shell to create the first lyre. Hermes, although mischievous and clever, was also the god of invention and creativity, and he was extremely happy about his creation. Meanwhile, his half-brother Apollo found out that Hermes stole his cattle and was very upset. Hermes tried to deny it, but Apollo demanded his payback. The two gods brought their fight to Zeus, the king of the gods. Before a punishment could be decided, Hermes played his lyre in front of both Apollo and Zeus for the first time. As Apollo heard the music, his anger melted away. The music was so beautiful and that it brought peace to both gods. When Hermes realized the value of the lyre, he offered the instrument to Apollo, and in exchange, Apollo forgave Hermes for the theft of his cattle. With the lyre now in his possession, Apollo became the master of this magnificent instrument. Through music, Apollo could inspire mortals and gods alike, and his lyre became an extension of his divine power over the arts and music. They used it to play in competitions, which leads us to the competition between Apollo and Marsyas. This is a picture of literally Hermes taking his brother's cattle. As you can see, he's literally like two seconds old.
All right. So that now leads us to the duel. So eventually, these two instruments were pitted together in a musical duel between the god Apollo and the satyr Marsyas, who was the one that eventually picked up Athena's cursed double flute. So you can see in the picture here that he is playing the double flute on the left, and Apollo on the lyre is on the right. And so Marsyas, after he picked up the flute, he started practicing it and refining one which is judged by the 9 Muses, as well as King Midas, you may know from his tale of the Golden Touch. And this would result in the victor being able to do whatever they wanted with the defeated side. So you can sort of hear the sound of the instruments and how they might have sounded during the duel. However, these two artists, through Curse, they actually made a rendition where they sort of envisioned a combination of the two instruments playing together in collaboration rather than in competition, which I think is definitely a very interesting concept, considering that the two instruments are commonly grouped together and associated because of this duel. So, during the duel, Marseillaise was described as playing a tune that was wild and coaxing, and it incited everyone to dance in a very wild frenzy. In contrast, Apollo's music was termed a very beautiful piece that actually brought everyone to a standstill and brought tears to the listener's eyes. So there were many different results and many different accounts. So that included visual accounts such as this visual of the results. But many of the written accounts had differing versions of how it ended up as well. So one of them was that King Midas stood up and said, "Oh, I think Marseillaise actually won against Apollo." And he just refused to admit that Apollo played any better than Marseillaise because he said Marseillaise played the sweetest tune that he had ever heard. And Apollo, in anger, he turned King Midas's ears into donkey ears because he said that his ears were so dull they should take the shape that suited them best. So in a cartoon, it might look something like this. And in other accounts, Apollo, in order to beat the satyr, he actually played the lyre in ways that the double flute could not, such as behind his head or while singing. And so, eventually, in all the accounts, Marseillaise was sort of the losing side. He lost, and so he either ended up being killed or being tortured as a result of daring to challenge the gods. And so this conclusion is to be expected, especially since in Greek mythology, the gods are above all else. However, we also thought that this myth helped greatly solidify the role of music in humankind and humankind's interest in music. Because with interesting stories such as these, this can captivate listeners' interest in music and being interested in continuing on learning about music. So in closing, with I think an argument that many other teams have presented today, we believe that music is not only about telling stories, but it is a story of its own. Because it has many different perspectives, and from many different cultures, many different areas,